watched my billionaire plus one write a $50,000 check to my sister, the same sister who just humiliated me in front of 200 wedding guests for being too poor to afford a proper gift. Olivia's face went white as she realized the homeless-looking guy in jeans was worth more than her entire wedding, but she had no idea what he'd really done for me. I'm Maya Brooks, and at 28, I thought I had my life figured out. Well, sort of. My days started at 5 a.m. pulling espresso shots at Bean Their Coffee, dealing with customers who thought a $4 latte was highway robbery. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was serving overpriced drinks to people who probably made more in an hour than I did all week. After my coffee shop shift, I'd rush home to my studio apartment. And when I say studio, I mean a glorified closet where my bed doubled as my couch and my kitchen table served as my art desk. The rent was still killing me, but hey, it had decent lighting for painting. That's what mattered, right? Then there were my evening shifts, cleaning office buildings downtown. Nothing quite humbles you like scrubbing toilets for executives who wouldn't even make eye contact in an elevator. But those late night hours paid the bills, and more importantly, they funded my art supplies. Between midnight and dawn, magic happened. I'd set up my easel in that tiny space, surrounded by canvases stacked against every wall, and paint like my life depended on it. Because honestly, it did. Art wasn't just my passion, it was my sanity, my hope, my everything. The contrast between my world and my sister's couldn't have been starker. Olivia was 32, married to money, and had never worried about choosing between groceries and paintbrushes. She lived in a world of charity galas and country clubs where people discussed their problems over $100 bottles of wine. Our relationship had always been complicated, but it got worse after she married Richard 3 years ago. Suddenly, every conversation turned into a lecture about my impractical career choices and unrealistic dreams. She meant well, I think, but her version of helping felt more like judgment, wrapped in designer packaging. When Olivia's wedding invitation arrived, yes, she was getting married again, this time to someone even wealthier, I knew I was in trouble. The registry was full of crystal vases that cost more than my monthly rent and kitchen appliances that belonged in restaurants, not homes. I stared at that invitation for hours. The venue alone probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. But Olivia was still my sister, and despite everything, I wanted to be there for her big day. That's when I decided to create something from my heart instead of my wallet. I spent weeks working on a handmade card, painting a watercolor scene from our childhood, the two of us building sandcastles at the beach during one perfect summer before life got complicated. Every brushstroke carried memories, love, and countless hours of careful detail. The plus one situation was another story entirely. I couldn't show up alone to this circus, but my dating life was about as successful as my bank account. Then I remembered Ethan Cole, my old college roommate who'd somehow stayed in touch through occasional social media likes and birthday messages. Back in college, Ethan was the guy who lived on ramen noodles and wore the same 3 thrift store t-shirts in rotation. He was brilliant with computers, but couldn't afford anything beyond basic survival. We'd bonded over being the broke kids in a sea of trust fund babies, and I hadn't seen him in years, but his Facebook showed he was still the same casual, low-key guy I remembered. Perfect. He wouldn't judge the crowd, and I wouldn't feel embarrassed about bringing someone who didn't fit Olivia's social expectations. What I didn't realize was how badly I'd misjudged everything about the situation I was walking into. The rehearsal dinner was about to become a nightmare that would change everything I thought I knew about worth, value, and the people closest to me. But that humiliation would lead to the most shocking revelation of my life. The rehearsal dinner felt like stepping into a movie set where I definitely wasn't the star. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead like expensive question marks, and every surface seemed to sparkle with the kind of wealth that makes your wallet cry just by looking at it. I clutched my handmade card tighter, suddenly aware that my one nice dress, bought 3 years ago for another wedding, probably cost less than the centerpieces. Well, at least I showed up, right? The guests floated around in designer everything, their jewelry catching the light like tiny disco balls. I recognized the type from my office cleaning days. These were the people whose desks I'd dusted, whose coffee cups I'd washed, except now I was supposed to mingle with them as an equal. The irony tasted bitter, but Why was everyone gathering around the gift table so early? Apparently, Olivia had decided to make gift opening part of the rehearsal dinner entertainment, because nothing says classy like turning presents into a public performance. The pile grew steadily as guests arrived, Tiffany boxes stacked next to Waterford crystal, designer luggage nestled against high-end kitchen appliances that probably had more computing power than my laptop. Each gift came with polite applause and appreciative murmurs from the crowd. Then there was my card sitting on that table like a dandelion in a rose garden. I watched from across the room as Olivia worked her way through the mountain of expensive offerings. She'd hold each item up, read the card aloud, and graciously thank the giver. While everyone nodded approvingly, the performance was flawless, practiced, perfect, and the weird part is, I actually felt proud of my gift at first. Hours of careful brushwork had gone into that watercolor. Every detail of our childhood memory was painted with love, not money. Shouldn't that count for something? Makes sense to think that way, right? But I was about to learn how wrong I could be. When Olivia picked up my card, the room's energy shifted slightly. Maybe it was my imagination, but conversations seemed to pause. She opened it carefully, and I watched her face change as she took in the painted scene of our younger selves building sandcastles. The silence stretched longer than it should have. "Oh," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "Maya made me something homemade." She held the card up like it might be contagious. The watercolor that had taken me dozens of hours looked suddenly small and amateur under those bright lights. Several guests craned their necks to see what could possibly warrant such a lukewarm reaction. "How cute," Olivia continued, and that word landed like a slap. Not beautiful, not meaningful. Cute, like something a child brings home from art class. But she wasn't done yet. The wine had clearly given her courage, and the supportive murmurs from her wealthy friends had given her an audience. What happened next still makes my stomach clench when I remember it. "I suppose not everyone can afford to shop from the registry," she announced to the entire room. 200 faces turned toward me like sunflowers following the sun, except this attention burned instead of warmed. Maya's always been more focused on playing with paints than getting a real job. Playing with paints. My life's passion reduced to a child's hobby in front of people who already saw me as lesser. The carefully painted memory of our happiest moment together dismissed as worthless because it couldn't be bought in a store. Let's not forget that this was my sister, the person who knew exactly how much my art meant to me, who'd watched me struggle and sacrifice for years to pursue something I believed in, and she'd just used that knowledge to humiliate me publicly. My face burned so hot I thought the sprinkler system might activate. Some guests looked sympathetic, others seemed genuinely amused by the show. A few whispered behind their hands, probably wondering how someone so poor had ended up at such an exclusive event. The worst part of me actually agreed with her. Standing there surrounded by luxury I'd never afford, watching gifts worth more than my annual income get unwrapped one after another, I questioned everything. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I should have gotten a real job years ago. Maybe my dreams were just expensive delusions, keeping me poor and pathetic. I excused myself to the bathroom, my legs somehow carrying me through that crowd of staring faces. Once safely locked in a marble-tiled stall that probably cost more than my car, I finally let the tears come. They weren't just about the humiliation, though that stung enough to last a lifetime. They were about doubt. About feeling small, about wondering if everyone who'd ever called my dreams impractical had been right all along. For 20 minutes, I sat there considering my options. I could leave right now, fake a headache, catch an Uber, and never speak to Olivia again. Let her have her perfect wedding without the embarrassment of her poor artist sister dragging down the ambiance. Then there is the stubborn part of me that refused to give her that satisfaction. I'd already been publicly humiliated. What was one more day? I'd attend the actual wedding ceremony tomorrow, sit in the back, and maintain whatever dignity I had left. Then I'd go home and figure out what the hell to do with the rest of my life. What I didn't know was that tomorrow would bring revelations that would turn everything upside down. Because while I was questioning every choice I'd ever made, Someone who truly understood the value of my work was about to make an entrance that would change everything. My plus one was finally going to show up looking nothing like the successful person he'd become, carrying secrets that would make Olivia's face go white with shock. But that night, sitting in that bathroom stall surrounded by marble and shame, I had no idea that my art had already found its audience. I had no clue that my financial struggles were about to become ancient history, or that the man I remembered as the broke college kid who lived on ramen noodles had become someone who could write checks that would make wedding guests gasp. All I knew was that tomorrow I'd have to face that crowd again, and somehow I'd have to find the strength to hold my head high while doing it. The real show was just about to begin. Despite my humiliation, I dragged myself to the wedding ceremony the next day. Call it masochism or stubbornness, but I wasn't about to let Olivia think she'd broken me. I slipped into the back row of the cathedral, hoping to blend into the expensive wallpaper like some kind of broke chameleon. The ceremony was exactly what you'd expect. Flowers that cost more than my rent, a dress that probably funded someone's college education, vows about eternal love delivered to an audience that measured devotion in carats. Then Ethan finally showed up. He looked exactly like I remembered from college, except somehow worse for a formal wedding. Jeans that had seen better days, sneakers that belonged at a coffee shop, not a cathedral, a button-down shirt that screamed, "I grabbed this from my closet 5 minutes ago." Honestly, I was almost embarrassed. Here I was, already the designated poor relative, and my plus one looked like he'd wandered in from a grocery store. But you know what? At least he showed up. That was more than I could say for most people in my life lately. During the reception, while everyone else networked and air-kissed their way through small talk, Ethan and I found ourselves sitting at the reject table with assorted distant cousins and college friends who didn't make the inner circle cut. Perfect. We could be social outcasts together. I've been following your art online, he said out of nowhere, stabbing at his overpriced chicken. Your paintings are incredible, Maya, really incredible. I almost choked on my wine. After last night's public shaming, compliments about my art felt like salt in an open wound. Thanks, but apparently incredible doesn't pay the bills or buy wedding gifts that don't embarrass your entire family. He gave me this look I couldn't read. Don't let one person's opinion define your worth. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one who got roasted in front of 200 people for being too poor to shop at Pottery Barn. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. Gift opening time, round 2. Because apparently yesterday's humiliation wasn't enough entertainment for this crowd, Olivia positioned herself at the head table like a queen holding court, ready to perform gratitude for her adoring subjects. The expensive parade started again. More crystal, more designer luggage, more kitchen appliances that probably had artificial intelligence built in. Each gift earned enthusiastic applause and gracious thank yous that sounded rehearsed but sincere enough for the audience. Then Ethan stood up. He walked to the front with an envelope in his hand, moving like he owned the place despite looking like he'd dressed in the dark. This is from both Maya and me, he said simply, handing it to a confused-looking Olivia. She opened it with the same theatrical flair she'd used on everything else. Then her face changed. The confident smile vanished. Her eyes widened like she'd seen a ghost, except ghosts don't usually come with 5-figure price tags. $50,000, she whispered, but the microphone caught it anyway. The entire room went dead silent. People started craning their necks, murmuring to each other, trying to figure out what just happened. Someone pulled out their phone and started Googling. Then I heard it, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Ethan Cole, that's the tech guy, the billionaire. Wait, what? Olivia's face went through more expressions than a drama class warm-up. Confusion, shock, embarrassment, and dawning horror as she realized she'd spent the last 24 hours treating a billionaire's companion like a charity case. But the real revelation came later, when Ethan pulled me aside. Maya, I need to tell you something, he said, looking nervous for the first time all weekend. I've been buying your paintings, 3 of them actually, through intermediaries because I wanted the purchases to be based purely on merit, not friendship. My brain stopped working. What do you mean, buying my paintings? 2 million each. Your work has been selling to collectors who recognize real talent when they see it. You're not struggling anymore, Maya. You haven't been for months. You're actually quite wealthy. The wedding reception continued around us, but I felt like I was floating somewhere outside my body, watching my entire understanding of my life crumble and rebuild itself in real time. I wasn't poor, I wasn't failed, I wasn't the family disappointment, I was successful, and I'd been too busy doubting myself to notice. Standing there with the truth washing over me like cold water, I realized how completely I'd misunderstood my own life. While I was scrubbing toilets and counting pennies for art supplies, my paintings were hanging in collectors' homes. While Olivia was lecturing me about getting a real job, I was already making more money than most people dream of, $6 million. That's what my art had earned while I worried about rent. The irony hit me like a truck. I'd spent months checking my bank account obsessively, rationing grocery money, wearing the same dress to every event. Meanwhile, payments were sitting in accounts I didn't even know existed, waiting for lawyers to sort through the paperwork of anonymous art sales. Ethan explained how he'd discovered my work online and immediately recognized something special. He'd contacted galleries, set up the sales through intermediaries, made sure everything was legitimate and based purely on artistic merit. No charity, no pity purchases, just business. I wanted to tell you at the perfect moment, he said, when you'd really understand what it meant. And boy, did I understand now. Across the reception hall, Olivia was still holding that $50,000 check, looking like someone had replaced her champagne with vinegar. The same sister who'd called my art playing with paints was now staring at proof that my hobby could fund her entire wedding twice over. The guests who'd witnessed last night's humiliation were putting pieces together. Phones came out, Google searches happened, someone found articles about record-breaking sales by an emerging artist named Maya Brooks. The whispers started again, but this time they carried a very different tone. But here's what surprised me most. I didn't feel vindicated or vengeful. I felt free. For years, I'd let other people's definitions of success make me question everything I loved. I'd believed that struggling meant failing, that being different meant being wrong. Olivia's cruelty had actually been a gift, forcing me to see how much I'd been diminishing myself. My art wasn't just good enough, it was extraordinary. Standing in that reception hall, surrounded by people who measured worth in designer labels and expensive gifts, I finally understood something crucial. I'd never needed their approval in the first place. The homeless-looking guy in jeans turned out to be worth billions. The poor artist sister turned out to be a millionaire. And the handmade gift everyone dismissed, it represented something none of those expensive presents could touch. Authentic love, real talent, true value. Sometimes the most valuable things come in the most unexpected packages,